record. Okay, gentlemen, Masechet Makkot, Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. The pasuk says, "Pekudei Adonai Sharim Mesamech Elev." The ordinances, the rules of Hashem, meaning the Torah, they bring joy to one's heart. So let's do this. All right, we're in the Mishnah. Me'idim anu et ishpeloni. So just by way of introduction, you all know the rule of edim zomemim. But I'll repeat it just because we've kind of been away from the Gemara for a while. There are two rules that one has to keep in mind when reading these sugyot. The first rule is, what is an Eid Zomem, right? An Eid Zomem is a false witness, but it's a very special type of false witness. Namely, an Eid Zomem is a false witness who are falsified in the following manner. The witnesses, let's call them Reuven and Shimon, they come to court, they testify. As we said on numerous occasions, when any witness comes to court, the court, as a preliminary matter, will ask them questions related to where were they at the time of the incident that they are reporting. Where were they? The court is also going to ask them questions regarding, and when did the incident take place? There will be 6 questions about time. There will be 1 question about place. Where were they? And when did it take place? These 2 witnesses, Reuven and Shimon, are falsified as follows. Another set of 2 witnesses come, and they testify that the first set of witnesses, namely in our example with Reuven and Shimon, were in a different place at the time of the supposed incident. So let's say Reuven and Shimon said that they were in Netanya, Israel, a week ago, and they saw the incident that they're testifying about. The 2 new witnesses come to court and say they were not in Netanya, Israel at that time, because they were actually with us a week ago, and we were all in Aventura, Florida. So there's no way they could have witnessed what they allege that they witnessed, the incident that they witnessed. That's what an Eid Zomem is. Edim Zomemim is that. So that's the first rule of Edim Zomemim. The second rule of Edim Zomemim that you have to keep in mind is as follows. What is the punishment? How do we punish the Edim Zomemim? And the answer is, we punish them by doing onto them what they would have the court do onto the object of their testimony. So for example, they testify that they saw Moshe eating basar teme'ah, pig meat. They saw him eating pig meat. They warned him, they gave him hatra'ah. He acknowledged the hatra'ah and threw it back in their face. And therefore Moshe is liable to receive Malkut. That's a rule. It ends up that they were Edim Zomemim. These witnesses are falsified. What do we do to them? We do to them what the court would have done to Moshe. What was the court going to do to Moshe? The court was going to give Moshe Malkut. So what do we do to the Edim Zomemim? We give them Malkut. And so on. So anytime that an Eid Zomem does make that the Edim Zomemim testify, and then they're falsified, the question comes up, what are we going to do to them? We want to do to them what they were going to do to the victim of their false testimony. So let's read the following Mishnah. Okay? Here goes. Just to finally, last, just kind of preliminary note, I'm sorry, I know everybody's anxious to start. I certainly am, I apologize, but let's just get this. So what is the subject that we're dealing with? We're dealing with sui generis cases. Situations where it's not clear how we are going to punish the Edim Zomemim as the court would have punished the victim of their testimony, because the situation is one where, for example, the Edim Zomemim we studied in the earlier Mishnah, testified that a Kohen was a ben Gerusha ben Chalusa. Well, what do we do to the Edim Zomemim? I mean, what are we going to say? We're going to say they're ben Chalusa ben Gerusha. They may not even be a Kohen. I mean, it's right. So that's what we're dealing. We're dealing with sui generis cases, or cases which are a bit unusual. I don't like the word sui generis. I take that back. Unusual situations. Okay. So here's a situation. I'm reading the Mishnah now. מעידים אנו את איש פלוני שגירש את אשתו ולא נתן לה כתובה. As you know, I'm reading based upon the Kitvei Yad. In this case, it's not even Kitvei Yad, it's just easy. Just look at Harambam, Perush, Mishnah, the Kafach edition, and we know what the Gersa Harambam is. So I don't want to, I can say it's Kitvei Yad, but in this case, it's easy. I do have the Kitvei Yad. I took the Munich edition from my father's house. Alav Shalom. I took the Munich edition, but this particular Mishnah is just based on the. So you'll see the differences in the way the text is published and the way I'm reading it. So me'edim anu et ish pelonim. The witnesses, the false witnesses, the edim zomemim, they testify that such person divorced his wife. Velo natan laha ketubah, and he did not pay her the ketubah. I'm going to explain that in a moment. V'halo ben hayom ben lemachar sofo liten laha ketubah. The problem is as follows. The edim zomemim are testifying that this man divorced his wife and didn't pay her the ketubah. Again, put it on the side. I will fill in the blanks. Now, the problem is, how do we punish the edim zomemim? So you say, oh, well, that's easy. Make them pay the ketubah. They wanted the husband to pay the ketubah to the wife. Make the edim zomemim pay the ketubah to the husband. It's not so simple, because the husband would have ended up paying the ketubah to his wife anyway. So it's not like the edim zomemim were causing the husband to incur a financial loss, because in any event, the husband would have paid the ketubah. That's the problem. Okay, let's delve into this a little more clearly, and I will fill in some of the blanks. What is the ketubah? It's important to understand what the ketubah is. Only by understanding what the ketubah is would you be able to understand the analysis that the Chachamim give to this situation. So let's start by explaining the ketubah. When a man marries a woman, before he marries her, before the nisu'in, I'm using now the technical term, before the nisu'in, he must give her a ketubah. The ketubah is a contract. The contract sets forth various obligations, but the primary obligation of the ketubah is as follows. If the husband either divorces his wife or passes away before his wife, in both those cases, the wife is entitled to a sum certain of money. Okay? Let's assume, just for purposes of our discussion, that the amount specified in the ketubah is $10,000. Let's assume. So now, let's take the situation again. The husband gives the ketubah to the wife. Now, years later, they live a nice, happy life together. The husband dies. When the husband dies, and now we have the estate of the husband, and we have people who are going to inherit the estate. They're going to inherit the assets of the husband. Before we give those people whatever it is that they're entitled to, we take $10,000 from the estate and we give it to the widow. We give it to the wife. That's the most basic law of the ketubah. Similar situation. They get married. Husband gives her a ketubah. It has $10,000 in it. After a few years of marriage, the husband can't take it anymore. They decide they're going to get divorced. Husband gives her a get. When he gives her a get, he cannot send her away without money. We look at the Ketubah, and he must pay her the $10,000. Okay? So the Ketubah is a contract which requires the husband to pay a sum certain to the wife. Until now, it's clear, correct? All right. Let's look at another alternative. Let's say that it happens to be that the husband outlives the wife. Okay. So again, they get married. This is situation number 3. Situation number 3 is they get married, they live a nice long life together, and in this situation, the husband is alive and the wife dies. What happens to the Ketubah? Well, the Ketubah has $10,000 in it. That $10,000 now belongs to the husband. It reverts to the husband. Until now, it was technically speaking the wife's, right? But if the wife is to die, then the debt, so to speak, the debt is extinguished, and the husband no longer owes the money to the wife, and it's essentially there's a transfer of wealth. If we had to do a balance sheet, we would transfer $10,000 from the balance sheet of the wife to the balance sheet of the husband. Why? Because in this case, in this third case, the wife died first. Okay? So if I had to look at the Ketubah, I would say that essentially the Ketubah is a promissory note. It's a promissory note which contains a debt. The wife owns the note, and as the owner of the note, she is entitled to the $10,000 in our example, specified in the note. But unlike a regular promissory note, which has a date and it says, you must pay back the debt on this in this date, in the case of the Ketubah, the date is left open. It's contingent upon the wife outliving the husband or the wife getting divorced by the husband. And this is the primary law of the Ketubah. There are many other laws of the Ketubah. There's Ketubah Bani Dichrim. There's a Ketubah for the door. There's many, many laws of the Ketubah. I'm just giving you the basic law because this is a law that is relevant for purposes of our Mishnah. Okay? Let's read the Mishnah a second time. Now that I filled in the blanks, let's read the Mishnah a second time. Here goes. So these Edim Zomemin, let's call them Reuven and Shimon. They say that the husband gave a get to his wife. Hold on one second. Shlom. Okay, the husband gave a get to his wife, Velo natan laha ketubah, but he didn't pay her the ketubah. So what are they saying? They're saying that the husband must pay the wife $10,000. Our example is going to be that standard $10,000. Ketubah doesn't have to have $10,000, right? It can have less. It can have more. The minimum ketubah betula gova 200 ve'almana maneh. But I'm just using this number for purposes of our class. So how do we punish the Edim Zomemim? So I say, make them pay $10,000. Really? Make them pay $10,000? But hold on. The husband may have had to pay, the husband owed the wife $10,000. It's right there in the Ketubah. So they didn't make him pay money that he didn't need to pay, right? That's the problem. So how do we deal with it? Thank you. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol yam b'daro.
Amen.
Right. Okay, so the Gemara says, you have Omedim. I like the Girsa of Harambam, also the Girsa of the Yerushalmi, and I believe also the Tosefta has it insinuates, at least the Tosefta, Omerim. Omerim. We say as follows, meaning the Dayanim, the judges who are confronted with this problem, they have to decide how to punish the Edim Zomemim. Omerim. Kama, so the judges must ask themselves the following question in deciding how to punish the Edim Zomemim. Omerim. Kama Adam Rosel Liten B'Chtubata Shel Zo. How much would a third person be willing to pay for the ketubah of this woman? This ketubah is worth the maximum value of the ketubah is $10,000, right? How much would a third person, right, coming in an arm's length transaction, the wife says, I want to sell you the ketubah, right? I want to sell you my rights in the ketubah. But I just added a word. I want to retract what I just said. I want to be even more precise. This third person is coming. We didn't say who he's coming to. We didn't say if he's coming to the wife. We didn't say if he's coming to the husband. He's coming, and there's the ketubah, and this ketubah is an asset, and it has a value. Okay? I'm intentionally being ambiguous because the Mishnah is ambiguous. Who is the person coming to? Not clear from the Mishnah, right? The Gemara will resolve the ambiguity. So, Kama Adam Rose Liten B'Chtubataha Shel Zo. How much will a third person coming to make a deal to purchase a ketubah? How much will he pay for this ketubah? Okay, now this third person is going to be looking at the ketubah, and he's going to be taking the following items into consideration as he thinks about the value of the ketubah. What are the possibilities? It's possible that this woman may become a widow. If he bought the ketubah and she becomes a widow, he's a very happy man. His gamble paid off. He paid what he paid for the ketubah, and now he's going to be getting the full face value of the ketubah. Namely, when the husband dies, they're going to be coming before the estate court, and all the inheritors are going to be there, and they're going to say, well, we are the beneficiaries, we are the inheritors, we want to receive our portion under the will, under whatever inheritance law, if it's the laws of Nachalot, or if the laws of Sava'ah, we want to get our portion in the inheritance. The person who purchased the ketubah will come to court, and he will hold the ketubah in his hand, and he will hold the deed of sale in his hand, under which deed the ketubah was transferred to him, and he will be entitled to receive the $10,000. That's the dream. Now let's go back in time. That's the dream this person is thinking about when he's going to buy this ketubah. He's thinking about the day that he goes to court and he gets $10,000. How much will he be willing to pay for that dream or for that possibility, right? Onit Garisha, another dream. The husband ends up divorcing. The husband ends up divorcing the wife. That's another dream for this buyer. This buyer is thinking, this husband, he might end up divorcing her. And if he divorces her, again, I come to court and I tell the husband, pay me $10,000 because I now own the ketubah, right? So those are the two glorious outcomes from the perspective of this buyer. But not every outcome is glorious. Recently, I had somebody, a family member, young family member, asked me, should I buy stocks in the travel companies? They're all they all went down so much. Carnival Cruise, Princess Cruise, everything went down, and it went down so much of it. It can easily double and triple and maybe even quadruple. And I said, yes, it may double and triple and may even quadruple. That's the glorious dream. But for every glorious dream, there is a flip side. The flip side in these tour companies is they may also go bankrupt and be worth zero. It's a risk, and everybody has to assess the risk, right? It's a, that's the consideration. So what's the inglorious? What is the inglorious dream in this case? And the answer is ve'imeta yirashenna ba'alaha. And the inglorious dream, or rather the undesired alternative from the perspective of the person buying the ketubah, is if the husband ends up outliving his wife, he didn't divorce her, she died before him, he ends up getting back this promissory note, the $10,000 goes back to him, his balance sheet just jumped up by $10,000. So those are the two considerations. And in between these two considerations, there is going to be a value to this ketubah, and the value of this ketubah, whatever it is, will be the basis on which we penalize the edim zomemim. And we're going to tell the edim zomemim, pay that amount of money, whatever that amount of money is, and we didn't fully refine the, how this works. I'm going to let the Gemara do what the Gemara does, right? So that's where we're at. Okay. That's where we're at. Okay? And the Gemara is going to deal with one simple question. It's a very short sugya. It's not even a sugya, actually. It would be incorrect to call this a sugya. This is more like a commentary of the Gemara on the Mishnah. The commentary is based upon the following ambiguity. When we talk about a third party coming to purchase the ketubah, here's the problem. Is he coming to the wife to purchase the possibility that the wife will one day get the payout on the ketubah? Or perhaps this third party is coming to the husband, because perhaps it's the husband who will be getting the payout of the ketubah. Those are two possibilities. And if you look at the Mishnah, let's just read the Mishnah again. Omerim, Kama Adam Rose Liten Bichtuvata Shel Zo. How much would a person give to pay for the ketubah of this woman? But here's the question. Who is the third party approaching? Is he approaching the husband? That's one value. We'll see in a moment. The ketubah will have one value from the perspective of the husband. Or is this third party approaching the wife, in which case the ketubah will have another value? And we need to answer this question, because the answer to this question will determine what do the edim zomemim have to pay. Okay? And this is a typical situation. It's a typical ambiguity in the Mishnah. And perhaps this would be a good place to interject the following. These ambiguities in the Mishnah are not a reflection, chas v'shalom, of improper editing of the Mishnah. Okay, I want to explain this, because this is a really important yesod in studying Gemara. Why is the Mishnah ambiguous in this case? Why is the Mishnah ambiguous indeed in many cases where you need the Gemara to come and resolve an ambiguity? And the answer is fundamental and essential to understanding Gemara. I would go so far as to say that without the answer to this question, you really don't understand what the Gemara is about, right? So any class where at the beginning of the Masechet, I feel that this is a good place to say this. This is based upon Geret Sherira Gaon. My father, Ani Kaparat Mishkavo, he discusses this quite extensively in the Golden Doves, in section 4 of the Golden Doves. And by the way, some of you may know that I started posting short snippets, 15 to 20-minute snippets, where I explain paragraph by paragraph the golden doves. I strongly recommend those snippets because they really elucidate the Andalusian way of thinking of Harambam, of the Geonim, of Chachmei Andalus. So it's really important. But okay, back to here. When Rabbeinu HaKadosh decided to embark upon the project of setting forth the Torah Shebe'al Peh in a document, setting forth the Torah Shebe'al Peh as a text, there were two stages for this project. And it was an immense project, by the way. It was an incredible project. Only somebody like Rabbeinu HaKadosh could have done this. Only somebody like Rabbeinu HaKadosh could have done this because he was, as a Gemara in Masechet Gitin, Daf Nun Tet, it says that he had the ability to do this because never before since Moses was there a person who had combined in him the wisdom, the greatness in the Torah on the one hand, and wealth, power on the other hand. Moses was was incredibly wealthy, and he was the Gadol Hador B'Torah. I mean, Gadol, not Gadol Hador. That's actually for Moshe Rabbeinu. That's actually an insult. Chas v'shalom. He was the Gadol Kol Hador B'Torah. But Rabbeinu HaKadosh was compared to Moshe Rabbeinu in that he was the most powerful, wealthy person in his generation. The Gemara in Masechet Bava Mesi'ah, Daf Pedale, it compares the stable of Rabbeinu HaKadosh to the stable of Shevor Malka, the Persian king. So he was the most powerful and wealthy person of his generation, and he was the wisest Chacham of his generation. So the combination of wealth, power, and wisdom, that combination enabled him to do something that nobody else did. Two stages. Stage one, collect all the baraitot, collect all the shemuot, go to all the various batei midrash and find out what exactly is the material of the Torah Shebe'al Peh. Collect the material in a gross fashion, right? Collect all of it. That was stage one. Stage two was to take this material and from it distill a text that is sufficiently dense and sufficiently short, brevity, so that all the Hakamim would be able to study it be'al peh. Okay? I want to make sure you understand this clearly. The Mishnayot is an oral text, right? The Mishnayot represents the Torah shebe'al peh. And as such, it needed to be transmitted be'al peh. Right? So when the Hachamim transmitted the Mishnayot to each other, it's irrelevant whether they had it written down or didn't have it written down. As a historical matter, I understand that the Mishnayot were written down. But when the Hacham taught it to his Talmidim, he taught it be'al peh. It was transmitted be'al peh. That's very important. Now, if you would have just taken all this massive material, beraitot, shemuot, and put just here, take it. I'll edit it. I'll edit it. I'll organize it. No problem. I'll organize it. But keep it as a massive amount of material. They wouldn't have been able to study it be'al peh. So what did Rabbeinu HaKadosh do? That was stage two. He not only organized the material, he distilled the material. So the purpose of the Mishnayot is to create this super dense version of the Torah Shebe'al Peh that anyone can study by heart. I know for us it seems bizarre. Well, what do you mean anybody can study by heart? But it really, that's just a reflection on our generation and our educational level and our inability to properly exercise our brain muscles. Yeah, I do believe that as Am Yisrael develops, Be'ezrat Hashem soon, and as we get greater Torah scholarship, that studying Torah Shabbat will become something, not something unusual, and our children's generation or their children will be able to study Baal Peh. It's really not a big thing. So that's what the Mishnah is. The Mishnah is not meant to be an explanatory text. It is meant to be a dense text, intentionally so. And the project was a success. How do I know that the project was a success? Because as Rav Sherira Gaon says, the Mishnah was accepted by all the Hachamim as the authoritative rendition of the Torah Shebe'al Peh. It was accepted. And because it was accepted, the Torah Shebe'al Peh continued on generation after generation after generation. If it wasn't for the Mishnah, a single version of the Torah Shebe'al Peh, Bar Minan, we would have been all over the place. You think there's a lot of Makkot now? You think there's a lot of disagreements now? Oh my gosh. Thank God we have the Mishnah. Everybody recognizes the Mishnah. That's a starting point. Okay. Now you understand what the purpose of the Gemara is. The purpose of the Gemara is to explain those dense portions of the Mishnah that were intentionally lacking in clarity, because between clarity on the one hand and density of language on the other hand, Rabbeinu HaKadosh always chose density of language over clarity. And that's why you need the Gemara. So the Gemara was the Hachamim after Rabbeinu HaKadosh sealed the Mishnah. They sat down, they would study the Mishnah, and they would explain the Mishnah. Now in this case, you look at Rav Chisda and Rav Natan bar Oshaya. So Rav Chisda was a junior Talmid of Rav. I wouldn't say junior Talmid, a Talmid of Rav. So that's second generation of the Emoraim. So that's interesting, because that means that here you have the yeshiva. It's in the second generation. Rav Chisda eventually became the Rosh Yeshiva of Sura later on, after his friend Rav Huna passed away. So here you have, at the end of the second generation of the Emoraim, and here's a passage in the Mishnah that the Hachamim still did not resolve. That's interesting as a historical matter, that you see how the Hachamim were always studying the Mishnayot and always coming out with resolutions of ambiguous terms. So here's the ambiguous terms. So getting back now to our Mishnah, getting back to what we were talking about. Kesad Shamim. How do we evaluate the value of the Ketubah? The correct Girsa. Rav Chisda Amar Bevaal. Rav Chisda says we evaluate the Ketubah from the perspective, the value of the Ketubah from the perspective of the husband. To be explained. Rav Natan bar Oshaya Amar Be'ishai says no. You evaluate the value of the Ketubah from the perspective of the wife. Now, normally you have a machloket Rav Chisda and Rav Natan bar Oshaya. Rav Chisda was the Rosh Yeshiva of Sura. Rav Natan bar Oshaya was not the Rosh Yeshiva of Sura. In fact, Rav Natan bar Oshaya eventually goes to Tiberias, to the Yeshiva of Rabbi Yochanan, and for historical reasons, which I'm not going to get into now, but he did not get semicha. He did not get semichat rabbanut. And the question is, who is halacha like? Before I go into explaining the details, again, Rav Chisda says you evaluate the ketubah based upon the perspective of the husband. Rav Natan bar Oshaya says you evaluate the ketubah based upon the perspective of the wife. And yet, Harambam makes Pesak halacha not like Rav Chisda, like Rav Natan bar Oshaya. And why is that? And the answer is because of the following statement by Rav Papa. Amar Rav Papa, Be'isha v'chtuvataha. Okay, something is askew in the language. I did not explain the content. Remember, I don't know if those of you who saw my video about Cubist paintings, Cubism, and one of the fascinating aspects of Cubism is that oftentimes the painting itself is all about structure, and oftentimes it lacks clear content, right? That level of studying the Gemara, as I said, was surata dishmata, where we focus on the structure, right? So we will get to the content. You know, I'm not trying to be Pablo Picasso of the Gemara. I will explain the content, but I just want to make you aware of something that is askew in the way the language is structured here. Who can tell me what is askew? I'm going to read it again, and then when I'm done reading it, I invite you to unmute yourself, whoever wishes to, and tell me what is askew in the language. I'm reading it again. Kesad Shamin. Rav Chisda Amar Deval. Rav Natan bar Oshaya Amar Be'isha. Amar Rav Papa Be'isha u'bichtubataha. Okay. Any volunteers? Don't be afraid. Yes, Elliot Levy.
I'm not positive, but at the end, it doesn't say Rav Papa Amar. It says Amar Rav Papa.
Correct. That is absolutely correct. That's an obvious syntactical oddity. For Rav Chisda, it says Rav Chisda Amar. For Rav Natan bar Oshaya, it says Rav Natan bar Oshaya Amar. But suddenly, for Rav Papa, it says Amar Rav Papa. Let me explain to you. What is the significance of Amar Rav Papa as opposed to Rav Papa Amar? If it would have said Rav Papa Amar, that would mean that he is disagreeing with the previous opinion, namely the opinion of Natan bar Oshaya. It doesn't say Rav Papa Amar. It says Amar Rav Papa. Amar Rav Papa, after a Rabbi Peloni Amar, means he is coming to explain the previous position. Now, Rav Papa was the Rosh Yeshiva in Pumbedita. Actually, it wasn't really Pumbedita. It was a place called but when the Yeshiva Pumbedita moved to where he was, and it was a place called Naresh, if I'm not mistaken about the pronunciation. Nevertheless, Rav Papa, let's say, was a Rosh Yeshiva. Why would Rav Papa explain the position of Rav Natan bar Oshaya? What does that tell us about the view of Rav Papa? Again, there's a machloket. There's Rav Chisda, very known rabbi, who's mentioned over and over and over again in the Gemara, and he was a Rosh Yeshiva. And there's Rav Natan bar Oshaya, who is far less known. He was not the Rosh Yeshiva, as I said, eventually goes to Tiberias, does not even get Semichat Rabanut for reasons that Professor Saul Lieberman, Alav Shalom, he actually has a fascinating discussion, not about Rav Natan specifically, but it explains a lot of what the Semicha was about and the problems with Semicha in those days. That's history. I'm going to keep it out of this discussion, only for now. So anyway, what is Rav Papa doing explaining the opinion of Rav Natan bar Oshaya? You understand my question? Why would he do that? Volunteers? Yes, Eddie.
It means he likely agrees with Rav Natan bar Oshaya. Otherwise, he wouldn't bother to explain only his opinion and not the opinion of Rav Chisda.
Exactly. If a Rosh Yeshiva is spending the time to explain to his Talmidim, I'd like to explain to you the opinion of Rav Natan bar Oshaya, he is actually stating that the opinion of Rav Natan bar Oshaya is legally binding. It is the halakha, as opposed to the opinion of Rav Chisda, which is not the halakha. And you will see later on, perhaps we will have time at the end of this class, you have another 13 minutes, whatever it is. we will see that Harambam makes Pesach like Rav Natan bar Oshaya. And now you know why. So you see why structure is so important. So when I spoke about the Cubist painting, I wasn't just talking about Cubism. I was talking about Gemara, right? And you see the importance of looking at things structurally and being sensitive to syntactical oddities, right? Okay, that's the structure. Now let's look at some content. How about it? Okay, so I'm going to read it and I'm going to give you the content. The content is rather detailed. It's a bit, I think it's a bit difficult, but we're recording this, so you'll all have it on YouTube and you can hear it, you know, if you need to hear it again. If you need, I'm not saying that would be the case, but if you need to hear it again, you can certainly do so. So, okay, let me read it now. Kesad Shamin. Question again. How do we evaluate the value of the Ketubah from whose perspective? You evaluate it from the perspective of the husband. Let's think about that for a second. From the perspective of the husband, well, the husband here is a debtor. Wait, hold on. He's a debtor, but doesn't he have a chance of having his balance sheet increased by the amount of the ketubah? Well, yes, we said that. If the wife is to die before him, right, then the value of the ketubah, the promissory note is extinguished, and that means that the husband's assets just went up by $10,000. That's worth something. So what is that worth? So the husband goes to somebody, third party. He says, you know, I want to tell you, my wife is really, he says, his wife is really sick. She doesn't have a long time to live. And I got to tell you, I'm in for a bonanza. $10,000 coming right back to me. So what happens? So the third party says, well, why are you telling me this? He says, well, I kind of need the money now. How about you give me $9,000 and then I'll give you the $10,000 when it comes back to me. What do you say? Now, just so you understand, I know this seems a bit odd, and I want to give you a very specific example of how this would work, because it doesn't necessarily work in every example. The ketubah has a value of $10,000. The husband, in the example that I'm now setting forth before you, this is the example. The example has, the husband has exactly one asset. A single asset. The asset is worth, it's a real estate. It's real estate. The asset is worth exactly $10,000. That, let's call it an orchard. Let's say it's an orchard. That orchard worth $10,000. From the perspective of Jewish law, the wife has a security interest in that orchard. When the husband dies, the orchard it goes to the wife, right? It's hers. So now the husband, now let's go back to our case. The husband goes back to the buyer. He says, you know, my wife is really sick. That orchard is going back to me, right? Through the ketubah, because the ketubah is going to be extinguished. Security interest on the orchard is going to be gone. How about you give me $9,000 today? And when my wife dies, you get the field. It's yours. You see how this would work? A bit odd, I know. But this is the explanation. This is how it would work. Halakha lema'aseh. I'm trying to bring it down to an actual concrete example. And that's a concrete example of the husband dealing with his wife's ketubah based upon the predicate that the wife is chas v'shalom about to die, and he can make some money. He needs the money now. He doesn't want to wait for the wife to die. If the wife is already dead, he would take the field and sell it for $10,000. He can't do that. The wife is still alive. So what is he doing? He's cashing out now. He's telling the guy, give me $9,000. Wife dies. You get the ketubah. Field is yours. The security interest in the field is what he's transferring. That's what he's transferring to the buyer. So the buyer is purchasing the ketubah, which means he's purchasing, to be more precise, the security interest, so that when the wife dies, the field goes back to him. Do I need to repeat it, or I think you're all good? You're all good? You're good. Okay, great. Okay, think about that. Now, that's one possibility. We do it that way. We look at what the husband would be selling his position for. Right? That's very different than what the wife would be selling her position for. So one possibility is badal. We would look at the position of the wife. Namely, the wife may feel that her husband is rather sick. And the wife is saying, I'm going to be getting $10,000 soon, right? And if I'm getting $10,000, well, I can't wait until that happens. How about I cash out now for $9,000? So she goes to the buyer. She says, listen, I have this ketubah. My husband is about to kick the bucket. How about you give me $9,000 now? He kicks the bucket. Ketubah is yours from today. You get $10,000. Deal? And that's be'isha. So those are the two possibilities. How do we look at it? Do we look at it from the perspective of the husband? It's one situation, right? By the way, if you look at it from the perspective of the husband and the wife is sick, it's practically worth nothing. If we look at it from the perspective of the wife and the wait, did I say that right? If we look at it from the perspective of the husband, that is incorrect. If we look at it from the perspective of the husband and the husband is sick, then the ketubah is practically worth nothing, right? If we look at it from the perspective of the wife and the wife is sick, again, that position is practically worth nothing, right? So we need to know, are we looking at it from the husband's perspective or from the wife's perspective? What is the value of the husband's position? What is the value of the wife's position? Those are two different questions. And the answer to the question will dramatically affect the value that the Eidim Zomemim have to pay to the, poor husband who did not divorce his wife and didn't, he didn't die, that we know, but he didn't divorce his wife. So what does he have to pay? So that's what we need to know. So that's the Machloket Rab Hisda and Rab Oshaya. Amar Papa Be'isha u'bech'tubataha. Rav Papa, 2 generations after Rav Hisda, he makes a clarification. This clarification, number 1, establishes that the halacha, as I said, is like Rav Natan Boroshia, but it says something very important. U'bech'tubataha. You value, based upon the wife's position, the value of the wife's position, and he adds a word. Ubichtubata. What is the purpose of that addition? You look at her ketubah. I want to explain this. I'm going to read Harambam, but I also want to explain and give this a little flavor from my perspective. Not that anything I'm saying, chas v'shalom, is in variance with Harambam. I think what I'm saying actually works well with what Harambam is saying, but nevertheless, I'm going to say it, and then we're going to read what Harambam says. There's various elements to the relationship, the financial relationship between the woman and her husband. I'm just going to give one example, but there's actually other examples. Okay, the example I'm going to choose is nichse melog. Okay, nichse melog are assets owned by the wife. These assets owned by the wife have a particular status in Jewish law. And it is as follows. The nichse melog owned by the wife, they generate income. let's say, for example, the wife owns an apartment building, and every month there is rental income of $1,000. According to halakha, the nichse melog, this is nichse melog, a neches melog of the wife, and therefore the husband is entitled to the $1,000 income stream. Monthly income of $1,000 goes to the husband. Nichse melog. There's different types of nechasim. There's nechasim also. There's nichse son barzel. I'm just giving you one example. So now let's consider the this situation. If we're looking at the wife's position, right? The wife's position is affected by several criteria. Well, the first is, who's healthier? Okay, so let's say the wife feels she's much healthier than the husband. He's about to kick the bucket, and she's going with the ketubah, and it has a certain value to her. But there's other things that go into the value. For example, right now the wife is going to be making $1,000 more a month because the nichse melog that she owns, which until now the husband was getting the income from, that also has a value, right? There's nichse son barzel, which again, I didn't explain what that's about. That also has a value. So do we take these other factors into account? That's a good question. And that's where the papa comes in and he says, we only take into account in this financial assessment, let's call it, right? The financial assessment is what do the Edim Zomrim have to pay? We only take two factors into the account. The first is the woman. What is the woman's perspective? Is she healthy? Is she young? Is she old? Is she creating tremendous anguish to her husband who's just waiting to give her get, right? That's one aspect, the woman. And the other is what is the sum certain stated in the ketubah. The ketubah is ikar ketubah plus tosefet ketubah. Together, $10,000, our example, $10,000. That's what we look at. We don't look at the nichse melog. We don't look at son barzel. We don't look at the other possible variables. That's it. Those are the two variables. Understood? Okay. Be'isha u'b'chtubataha. I want to finish the class by reading to you Rambam in Ilchot Edut. Okay, I'm going to read it to you. It's Ilchot Edut, Perek Kaf Aleph. Okay? Ilchot Edut, Perek Kaf Aleph. Where is it? Ilchot Edut, Perek Kaf Aleph. At the end. No, at the beginning. Okay, Perek Kaf Aleph, Halakha Aleph. Okay, I'm reading for you the halakha. Aydim shehe'idu shegeresh peloni ishto. Okay, these false witnesses come and testify that the husband gave a get to his wife. Velo natan laha ketubah, but he didn't pay her the ketubah. Behuzamu. And later on, a second set of witnesses came and testified that the first set of witnesses could not have been present when supposedly the incident took place, namely the incident being husband giving the wife a ketubah. They couldn't have been there because at the time of the incident, those witnesses, first set of witnesses, were with the second set of witnesses. How much do the Edim Domemim have to pay? Answer. Bahalo. Bahalo. Ben hayom uben lemachar. I'm sorry, bahalo. Ben hayom uben lemachar. Im geresh sofo litel ketubah. He would have to pay the ketubah anyway. So don't tell me that the witnesses have to pay the full value of the ketubah. That doesn't make any sense. The husband has to pay the full value of the ketubah. It's already there. It's an outstanding debt. Omeri. Therefore, the judges must make the following discussion, or ask themselves the following question rather. How much would a person be willing to pay her? You notice how Rambam resolves the ambiguity that was in the Mishnah, because Rambam is not meant for being studied be'al peh, right? So he resolves that ambiguity. How much would the person pay her when she sells the ketubah based upon the possibility or probability, but it's not a guarantee, that she will outlive the husband and that he won't divorce her? And whatever that number is, let's say that the wife would have been able to sell her ketubah for $9,000, where the situation was it was worth $10,000 and the husband is very old. So she would be able to get $9,000 for the ketubah. That's the amount that we make the edim zomemim pay to the husband. $9,000. Umsha'arin ba'isha u'bichtubata. And when we evaluate this number, how do we evaluate what this number is? We look at two things. We look at the woman, and we look specifically at the ketubah. Now, Rambam is going to elaborate. So just give me another 2 minutes. I know we're going a little over mechila. Let's just finish it. And for example, we look at the woman. Is she sick? Well, if she's sick, then the value of her selling the ketubah is going to be pretty low, no? Well, zekena, she's old. The value of her ketubah is going to be pretty low. So you come to a guy and say, I want to sell you my ketubah. He's saying, yeah, but it looks like you're going to die before the husband. Why do I want to pay a penny for this? The husband loves her. There's beautiful, harmonious relationship between husband and wife. What are the chances the husband is going to give her a get? Very low. And this is vastly different than a situation where you're dealing with a healthy woman who's young, or a family, a husband and wife, where there was discord. Because in that case, there may be a divorce. And of course, if there may be a divorce, from the wife's perspective, the value of the ketubah is much higher, right? We look at the ketubah. We look at the amount of money in the ketubah. Obviously, what is written in the ketubah? Is it $10,000? Is it $100,000? Well, obviously, that's going to be something we look at. These are the two things you look at. You look at the situation, the marital situation. Is the wife healthy, young, etc.? And you look at the sum certain specified in the ketubah. Based upon those two criteria and no other criteria, you would evaluate what would a third party pay for the ketubah. And that amount is the amount that the edim zomemim must now pay for the husband. They were going to make him pay the ketubah early. Well, they have to pay him now the value of that very ketubah that they were going to make him pay early. That's it. That's the class. Questions?
Are there any other commentators that didn't pick up on the way the sugya directed, that the halakha is like Rav Natan bar Oshaya?
I don't think there's a machloket on that point. I think everybody agrees with Harambam.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe there's a machloket on that point. I did not look at the Tosafot and the other commentaries, but I'm pretty sure that most of the commentators do agree with Harambam on this point.
Okay.
Questions? That's it. So I guess this week we're not studying Parashat HaShavua because Shiva Asar b'Tamuz. So Be'ezrat Hashem next week. Okay? All the best.
Thank you.